Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. Gemini Jets has just announced their, I guess they'll be September releases a couple of days ago, so it's time to take a look through those. Obviously, it's been a little while since Gemini announced anything, but I admit that's not really a big issue for me because it's generally quite hard for me to get too excited over Gemini announcements. And let's face it, they only ever release 10 or 11 models a month anyway. So it's not a huge haul of models like you're getting from Aero Classics or Phoenix or NG nowadays. Nonetheless, it is a reasonably interesting looking month, I think. Even though it has many of Gemini's core airlines popping up, Alaska, American, BA, there's no Emirates. And there is some interest to be had here. So, as per usual, what we'll do is we'll run through the releases, check them out, talk a little bit about their potential, and give them a rating from Supersonic to scrap metal. Before I do that though, don't forget to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and follow me on Instagram at YesToAirlines. Obviously also follow me on Facebook at YesToAirlines and check out yesterdaysairlines.com because that has a huge amount of information about a 400 scale, both the past, the present and the future. So keep an eye out on all of those channels to keep up to date with what's going on in 400 scale diecast airliners. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get over and check out the releases. So there are 11 releases for Gemini Jets this month, and we're going to start with the smallest, which is an ATR 72, and this ATR 72 is in the colours of Emerald Airline / Air Lingus Regional. So it's in the new Air Lingus scheme, not the old scheme, and that old scheme has already been made previously by Gemini, but it was made quite a long time ago, back in 2013. So there's obviously an affinity for Air Lingus Regional with Gemini, but interestingly, when I look back over the 16 models that Gemini has made on this ATR 72 mold, it's surprising how many of them are from Asia and not from North America or Europe. If you look back over the last 7 releases, then 6 are Asian, only 1 is not. So there's been, in that time, 2 Garudas, China Southern, Thai, Mass Wings, and Cebu Pacific, and the only one which is not Asian is FedEx. So it's definitely overdue that we see some more usage out of the ATR 72 mold by Gemini and ones that are not Asian. And I'm actually surprised there are so many Asian releases because Gemini don't usually play in Asia a lot because that's obviously jcwings turf. So that's interesting. Nonetheless, the ATR 72 mold itself is a lovely little prop liner. It's one of those old jcwings molds back when JC used to make quite a few regional airliners. And it's great that it's still in use, great that we're seeing a bit of action on it, and this is going to be a lovely little release without a shadow of a doubt. I quite like the Aer Lingus regional livery, not quite perhaps as interesting as their old green top schemes, but still nice, lovely mould, decent subject. For me, this one's going straight up into Supersonic. Love to see little prop liners and would love to see more of this kind of thing from Gemini. Moving off into Airbus territory, and there are 4 A320 family releases this month. The first that we're going to look at is Allegiant Air. It's an A319 N321NV, and it's a nice scheme. Allegiant's got an attractive scheme, and it's not the first time that Gemini have made an Allegiant A319. They made one which had sharklets back in 2017. This one does not have sharklets. I have to say that when you look back at that old release, it doesn't look particularly good, but I am very pleased to see that jcwings has been modifying and tweaking this mold, and they've modified the shape of the nose cone, and they've slightly modified how the nose gear is placed, and it is looking a lot better in recent releases. It still, however, is not the best A319 on the market by some distance, and interestingly, this year also there was another Allegiant A319 without sharklets with the wingtip fences that was released, and that came from RM Model Store using the Panda Models mold. there's not really any reason to get this Gemini version if you've already got the Panda version, and the Panda version is going to be nicer because the mold is so much better. So in that regard, it does take the shine off this release from Gemini somewhat, even though the mold has been slightly modified. So for me, it's going to be a perfectly okay release, but it's not that exciting. It's been done before and done better by somebody else. This is thinking of workhorse in my universe. It's not going to be great, but it's not going to be dreadful. It's an ordinary Gemini model, so workhorse. Talking about stinking, and the next two models up are both A320neos. Now, I've talked about this mold previously. It's using the base JC Gemini A320 mold, which is okay, like I just said, for the A319, but it's not going to win any awards. But unfortunately, the Neos that Gemini and JC produce have got these enormous engines attached to them, which just seem so outsized and almost touch the ground. It's not just the engines, it's also their placement on the pylons that is the problem here. So even though I really like Frontier Airlines and I'm really interested in the Frontier schemes, this release, which is going to be of N303FR wearing Poppy the Prairie Dog, is surely not going to be that good. They did make, after all, Champ the Bronco on the same mold back in 2017 again, and frankly, it wasn't very good. Especially when you have the opportunity to compare it to the Aero Classics Neo. Now, Aero Classics may have their issues in terms of print detailing and lack of aerials and such, but they've got a much better A320neo and they've used it quite a few times. So they've made 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 A320neos of their own. Once again, it does kind of impact the usefulness of this new Gemini release, which is going to be on a mold with gigantic engines. So for me, even though I like the scheme, even though I like the airline, I just can't really recommend getting it. The mold is not up to standards, and therefore I'm going to put this one down into Gas Guzzler. Following it into Gas Guzzler, of course, is the other A320neo. I just struggle to give these Neos anything but Gas Guzzler when they're coming from Gemini or jcwings, to be honest. This one's in the colours of Volaris from Mexico, XA, VSH. It's a nice scheme. It's the updated scheme with the much more colourful engines and the billboard titles, but yeah, it's still on that mold. This one's actually a special scheme too. It's got the 100 avions titles, which presumably means it's their 100th aircraft. So that's nice, but once again, not nice enough to mean you ought to be going out and buying it. Gemini have made an A320neo previously in the older scheme, and yeah, it looks much like the Frontier one. It doesn't look great. So yeah, I mean, it has to be Gas Guzzler. The mold just isn't good enough. Gemini need to get JC to modify this Neo mold and make these engines look better, because it's just ruining these models. So bringing up the rear of the A320 family releases is an American Airlines A321 Classic, or CEO, and that is N167AN, wearing the flagship Valor colours, which is quite an attractive special scheme, but it is a special scheme which is also being made by ngmodels and was announced last month. So they're both going to be bringing out pretty much the same model at exactly the same sort of time. Which should you choose, Gemini or ngmodels? Just look at the molds. It's clear as day that the NG A321 is better than the Gemini JC A321. Now, it doesn't mean the Gemini JC A321 is dreadful. It's not, but it's certainly ordinary. It does at least have the right wing on it when it's got sharklets, unlike Phoenix and Aero Classics. But overall, point for point, it's nowhere near as good as the new ngmodels mold. So personally, I don't see why anyone should be buying the Gemini version when there's an NG one coming out at the same time. If Gemini persist in going head to head with NG on models like this, then they really should be improving the quality of the molds they're using that they're trying to compete with NG on. So it's going to be fine, but it wouldn't be my choice of the two, and in that regard, it surely is a workhorse model. Okay, so that is the Airbus narrow bodies out of the way, and there's a couple more Airbuses to go, and both of these are effectively the same release, but of course one is in flaps up configuration and one is in flaps down, and they both represent British Airways Airbus A350 1000, and that is GXWBB. I had looked through the releases for BA A350 1000s, and this is not the first time that Gemini has been here. It has already released 2 previous versions, including XWBA and XWBC. Obviously, other manufacturers have also produced these. Phoenix produced a couple which look bloody awful, actually. And Aviation 400 has produced 2 as well, which look excellent. So it's not a new release by any margin, but it is the first time that there is a flaps down version available. Aviation 400 have literally just released a new version of this, which is an Aviation Retail Direct exclusive. British Airways is always popular, so I can completely understand why they're making these models, but it's not exactly exciting, is it, by any stretch of the imagination? Even so, the JC Gemini A350 is decent, and I'm sure these will both turn out to be attractive looking models. There's nothing really dramatically wrong with the mold at all. In fact, you know, JC has modified the nose a few years back, and it's looking pretty decent. So I'm sure these will be nice, and in that regard, I don't really see any reason not to give them decent scores, except that they're, you know, not particularly interesting and the same sort of thing that we've seen before. So I would say that from where I'm standing, I'm going to give the standard flaps down version, the standard flaps up version, a score of workhorse, because we've been here twice before. Surely everyone's got an A350 1000 by BA if they want one already. But if you're looking for that flaps down goodness, which I do quite like, then this is the first time that you've got the opportunity to get that, and I'm going to give the flaps down version a high flyer score. So that rounds up all the Airbus components of this month's release set, which admittedly is the majority of the release set, but there are a couple of Boeings as well, and the first one of those is a 727-200. Now, Gemini have been making a few of their 200 scale releases into 400 scale releases. I guess it's a good way to save money when you get to reuse the exact same artwork and don't have to do it twice. And this is an example of that. They've not long ago released a 200 scale version of this aircraft, CGCPB, in the colours of Canadian Pacific, or CP Air as it was going by at the time, Empress of Los Angeles. And so now they're rolling it out in 400 scale, and there's nothing wrong with that. They've not made it before. Only Aero Classics has made CP Air 727-200s previously, and they are expensive. So, expensive because they're hard to find. I mean, not expensive because they were expensive when they came out. So, yeah, this has got a lot of potential. Unfortunately, the caveat is that Gemini made a real mess of their most recent 727-200, that national example, where they slapped hush kits on it and then also misprinted the cockpit windows in an appalling way. So even though I think this should be an awesome model and one which you should be really excited to get, I've got, reservations. I've got reservations. So I'm struggling to put this up into Supersonic where I would normally put it, because I'm concerned. I'm concerned that they're going to muck the model up somehow like they did their last 727. So hopefully they won't do that. Hopefully there won't be any hush kits. Hopefully the cockpit will be better aligned with where it ought to be. So I'm going to put it into high flyer and cross my fingers and hope that Gemini don't make a mess of it. Because as you probably realize, this model was probably made ages ago. So it's not like it's just been made and they've learned their mistakes from the previous release. It was probably made at the same time or before that national release. So it's not like they see the mistakes and then go, oh, we'll fix them next month. It's just a potluck, really, because the models were probably made quite a while ago. So hopefully it's good. It should be good, but keep an eye out for it. Definitely check out the release pictures before you purchase. So the second and final Boeing that's made this month is a 737 Max, and that actually is good news because, as you probably know, good listeners, if you watch enough of my reviews, I actually really like the Gemini JC Max. It's really a very good model. And also good is that this one's coming in this really nice Orca West Coast Wonders scheme, which is a really attractive livery. So it's not the first time this scheme has come out. Aero Classics made some as blue box recently and included this one in there, and they did an okay version of it. But let's face it, the AC 737 Max mold is nowhere near as good as the Gemini Max mold. So even though AC made it and it looked okay, this is going to look much better coming from Gemini on this mold. So this one, actually, I'm really keen to see what it looks like. It's not the model that I can get because it's way outside my collection criteria temporarily, but I think it'll look really good. It's a great mold, really cool livery, and therefore I'm going to stick this one up into Supersonic because this one is one that I'm really keen to see how it turns out. The final civilian airliner this month is another Bombardier regional jet, another CRJ900. Gemini have been making a few of these recently, and they've been super popular even when Gemini stuff up the construction. So I'm sure this one will sell well as well, although I have to admit the livery is staggeringly underwhelming. It is in the colours of Mesa Airlines, but colours is perhaps a bit optimistic. It's basically a white fuselage with a black tail with Mesa titles in it. It's really not interesting as schemes go. I guess, you know, having that livery makes it easy for them to repaint it into other colors if they need to, but it doesn't even have any titles on the fuselage, which is a little weird. But then again, people like American regional jets. There's probably a lot of collectors out there who'd like to get this for their model airport, so I don't think the fact that the color scheme is a piece of junk is gonna have an impact on the sales. And overall, when Gemini put together the mold correctly, then the CRJ900 mold is a nice little mold. So this one is on what I would consider to be a great mold with a really mediocre livery, but nonetheless something that will be popular by a lot of people. I'm going to put it into Workhorse because I can't get excited about it, not with that livery, but I understand that a lot of people might consider this one to be more exciting, more high flyery, but not for me because the fuselage is completely blank, man. Surely they could at least put Mesa titles on the body of the aeroplane. And I realise that I keep on changing the way I say Mesa, I don't know, tomato, whatever. But for me, it's a workhorse model, even though the mold is good. So I round up this month's releases from Gemini Jets with their Max offering for this month, which is a C5 Galaxy. Yeah, I'm struggling to say much about this because, as far as I can tell, it's an exact copy of one they've made previously. It's in the colours of Dover Air Force Base, and looking back through the list of C5s they've made at least 1, 2, 3 or 4 previous Dover Air Force Base schemes. I think that the livery is effectively the same on all of them, so maybe this is a corporate deal of some kind with the Air Force. I don't know. You know, it's hard to get excited about it. I think I talked about the C5 last month or the month before. It looks like a great mold, but the liveries, they're not liveries, are they? They're camouflage schemes or whatever. I mean, it's basically just a black block colour with a small Air Force logo for the base on the tail. It's not very exciting. There's not a lot more to say. If you like the Gemini Max releases, and there's no reason not to because they're generally pretty good, then there's no reason not to get this. It'll be a good mold, but it looks like it's a re-release of something they've done multiple times beforehand, basically, and so therefore you probably got it if you really like them. So it's going to be ordinary in that regard. There's nothing new happening here, and therefore it's straight into the workhorse area. I do feel sometimes that I don't give the Max releases their due. It's not really my area of expertise, but then again, they all look so similar because US Air Force so often has not a lot of colour to it, or a lot of insignias. So, workhorse it is. So that's it for this month. There's not a huge amount to get excited by. Gemini release months, they're so similar to each other that it's hard to get really excited. You know, you get the odd regional airliner, you get the occasional retro model, which is typically one they've already made 200 scale. You get your Alaska, you get your United, you get your American, you get your BA. And, of course, you get your Emirates, which we don't have this month. But otherwise, it's very much of a muchness, and, you know, that's just Gemini for you, I guess. They know what they're doing, they do what they do, they generally do it okay, but they're not exciting, and they're not really setting 400 scale on fire by any margin. But solid, reliable release sets like this. Couple of interesting models for me, the Air Lingus Commuter ATR and that Alaska Max, and hopefully the CP Air 727. Otherwise, yeah, you've got a lot of okay models and some which on models that they really need to upgrade, like that Neo mold, especially if they're going to persist in using it so much. But that's Gemini for you. And that's it for today from yesterday's Airlines. So thanks very much for watching, guys. Keep an eye out for new material, and obviously there'll be more of these release videos coming for other manufacturers like NG and Phoenix and such. So until next time, it's bye from me.